Coming up, Michael Scotto reignites the rumors around the Cleveland Cavaliers and their desire to sign and trade Isaac Okoro, why the Brooklyn Nets are a logical fit, but also the issues that Cleveland has in-house accomplishing moves like this. We dive into it all from a Brooklyn Nets perspective coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA to get $20 off on your first purchase. Terms, they do apply. And Doug, this has been a theme throughout the off season for us on this show. It's been a theme for the past couple of years when it comes to Isaac Okoro and being a worthwhile Flyer player. As the rumors at least get reignited a little bit from Michael Scotto, I think there are interesting wrinkles when it comes to how Sean Marks has operated this offseason and maximizing value of the players that he's sending out and also trying to bring back in here.
I mean, has any other podcast in the world talked more about Isaac Okoro than this podcast? And I'm going to include Locked On Cavs. I'm going to include Locked On Cavs and any other Cleveland-based media. It's so hilarious how much we talked about it. It's like, and it's kind of more by accident than by direct intent, because we talked about Okoro last year as what the Nets should be thinking about, sort of kind of guy. He was an example of not so much about him, but the kind of guy the Nets should target, which was young, maybe wasn't totally working out in his situation, but had high pedigree at the time because he had been like a decently high draft pick and could be maybe had on the cheap. Like that was our working thesis for bringing up Okoro all the way back to like a year ago, almost around this time. Right. Mm-hmm. And then as the season goes, okay, we'll bring him up again because it has actually improved this season. And then now by the way, when we talked about it then, it wasn't even rumored. I think we just brought him up as a guy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. We're just kind of looking at the landscape, finding
now
those
the
right
rumors
pieces.
And now the rumors come that they have actually engaged on an actual talk about him. But if you think about how the Nets have proceeded with this offseason and how we actually wanted them to proceed going forward starting last year, this makes sense. They've already brought in other guys just like this. Killian Hayes, just like this, right? Zaire Williams, just like this. Like this is the prototype of the kind of guy that they are bringing in. So raise your hand, turn it around, pat yourself on the back, you and me, buddy, because we saw it coming a year ago that the Nets should take this direction. Sean Marks got in line, and it looks like the Okoro thing, I mean, while it's not imminent, I think it for sure has legs.
You know, the Olympics are going on right now in Paris, and oftentimes we talk about these are national heroes. And I don't know. Do we put Adam Armbrecht and Doug Norrie into that mix?
Yes,
for you guys to decide.
I know you're asking rhetorically, but I'm going to ask. You're asking rhetorically, but I'm going to answer you formulaically. Like, yes, we are heroes. There you go.
Yeah. See, so that and it's just something to think about as you listen to the episodes over the course of this summer. And I agree with you. The interesting thing about Okoro. So when we talk about bringing this up because of Michael Scotto, we'll get into the quote here from him in just a moment. But it's about this idea that not only the fit and the form and the function of the age, but inside of the players we now bring up, Killian Hayes, Zaire Williams, and now Isaac Okoro. Well, Isaac Okoro is the most, I'm going to say, accomplished to whatever degree you want to put that. He's the guy that has the most on paper, I think, where you say, oh, especially this past season in the areas improved, specifically with the perimeter shooting, you go, oh, well, now here's a guy that comes in and already has a baseline of expectation. This is going to be a sign and trade situation for Cleveland in order to get a deal like this done. It's not going to be for pennies on the dollar. It's not going to just be dumping money if you're the case of Memphis, or a player who needed to come to Summer League and have private workouts with teams like Killian Hayes in order to get an opportunity. Isaac Okoro has value. What I find fascinating in this coming back up is that the Brooklyn Nets, and fans have had concerns about this, but the old Dorian Finney-Smith, the tried and true DFS, continues to still have value around the league. And now I wonder if this is a little bit different than the other two situations, in that the Brooklyn Nets are looking at a guy that is more than just a flyer. we get him on this contract and we're probably going to be holding a value piece for another team down the road if we choose to go that direction. If it's not that the youth and the skill set makes sense for us personally. So that's why I like this coming back up, because it means that Sean Marks is thinking about flippable assets, not just flyer assets, as we've seen with some of the other moves.
Exactly. Like rehab some of the value maybe, and maybe give him a slightly more expanded role and see if like you can flip him down the line. I totally agree. I think that that's part of this. And if not, if you want to just end up keeping him, that's fine too. If he doesn't work out, you really didn't lose very much. I don't think, right? In the way that they're currently constructed. And so like it's one of these things where, again, like just to reiterate, are we like these massive Isaac Okoro fans? I don't really think so, but it's just mostly about the sort of the script that the Nets seem to be writing about the kind of guy. You don't need them all to work out. And like a lot of these contracts too, I mean, the Okoro one wouldn't be, it would be guaranteed, but like Killian Hayes, like it's not a guaranteed contract, right? Like there's a chance he doesn't break camp. Like Keon Johnson, we know, I'm pretty sure it's not already it's not fully guaranteed.
Only partially first year guaranteed. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like there's chances these guys just don't work all the way out for the full season. That's okay. You want to take more bites of the apple than less. And what you want to do, hopefully, is have guys that projected well to be NBA rotation players early on. For whatever reason, it didn't totally work out. Again, maybe the thing with Okoro too is, hey, we have enough of a sample size within a decent system that it just wasn't going to work. That's fine. I get that part too. Right. Where is he going to turn into some kind of superstar? No, right? But if can you trade, because of his age, could you get him to a place where another team wanted to trade a low first round pick for him later? Well, that would be great, because it doesn't seem like that's the case with Dorian Finney-Smith right now, right? Like it doesn't seem like they're able to match it. And we've said this so many times, and it's just worth repeating with the DFS and Cameron Johnson thing. Go find the trades that make sense with these guys. Like you just can't, it's so hard to find. We've said this multiple times, but just for those that maybe forgot or are new listening to the show, it's very difficult to find trades for these guys because of the money. Like that's really it. Like these other teams aren't, the other teams that could take him into, no one can take him into cap space. And then two, that really would want them. And then two, to send the money back out to equal it out, it just gets really, really difficult. And so I think that's just where you get kind of left. CJ is a little different because I think he has more real world value than DFS. He definitely has more real world value than DFS does at this point. But like these are the kinds of deals that you probably just have to end up making if you're Marks. Honestly, just to reset the age timeline. If nothing else, just reset around age and move on from there.
And coming up here in a second, we'll take a look at why Cleveland is not necessarily the perfect team to want to make trades with when it comes to Dorian Finney-Smith or even a Cameron Johnson. Assets that you want to bring back in, sometimes you have to think about draft picks living inside of the form, in this case, of an Isaac Okoro down the line at a future date. We'll get into that side of these trades this offseason coming up here in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at Gametime. Look, it's the summer. People love going to MLB games. That's just kind of a tradition, right? Like Gametime is going to give you tickets to anything, but it's going to make the MLB experience that much easier. With Gametime, it's an authorized ticket marketplace of MLB. They got a ton going on over at Gametime in the New York area. You got Twins going into the Citi Field to face the Mets, starting at $12 on Monday. Looking forward a little ahead here. Blue Jays coming into Yankee Stadium, starting at $17. Go find better deals than this than you're finding over at Gametime. Gametime's got everything. Got last minute deals, they got flash deals, zone deals, all in pricing, seat views. So you're going to make sure you know exactly what you're going to see when you sit down at your seat. Lowest price guaranteed. They're going to credit you 110% of the difference if you find a better price. They got Gametime ticket coverage as well. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account. Redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets. Lowest prices guaranteed.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about the reignited rumors around Isaac Okoro, trade partners. And by the way, as Michael Scotto reports it, like this is a two-way street where the Nets are also engaging with Cleveland. So, it's different in terms of having these assets and waiting for teams to come calling. There's some element here where Sean Marks is looking at it and saying, I want to do this. You mentioned resetting the age timeline. Like, let's keep going here. We've done it. We're doing it. Now let's try to push it as much as possible. And obviously, Dorian Finney-Smith, specifically outside now of Bogdanovich, represents the oldest player on this roster for Brooklyn. And he still represents, even with the player option, a guy that has at north of 14 million the most flexibility. 23 for Cam Johnson, same mid-20s when we talk about Bogdanovich as well. Oh, sorry, 19 for Bogdanovich. So there's still different variables there when you talk about trying to make that money work. When we looked specifically at just Michael Scotto, who wrote, as previously reported, Dorian Finney-Smith has drawn trade interest from Cleveland and has come up in discussions for Okoro. Sources said Cleveland is also intrigued by Cam Johnson, according to reports. So the one thing about this that I think is interesting in terms of, let's stick with Dorian Finney-Smith here, because there's also been these rumors about Cam Johnson and interested parties. When you go over and you think about assets that Cleveland has, well, they do have first round picks, in 2030 and 2031. So you could tap into those, but that's it. Everything else that they hold in their power, they have 2 2025 first rounds, one coming from Milwaukee, a 26, a couple in 27, and then down the line. This is an example, though, to your point at the top of, it's not all perfect scenarios here. It's not, hey, we always value Dorian Finney-Smith as a first round asset, and that's what we want for him. This is Cleveland saying, we don't got a lot, but we do have this player that we can go ahead and put a contract on the books to make sure that we can absorb the money coming in from Dorian Finney-Smith. And I wonder if it's going to be, here's 2 second rounders. I don't know. Here's a 3rd second rounder. I don't know if this is going to get to that territory where they talk about first round picks, if it's Dorian Finney-Smith specific.
No,
but I also think if you're Sean Marks, you go, hey, if you throw enough things into the bag here as we're walking out the door, it probably all works out. And even at that point, sorry to keep you cut off there, even at that point, you also have to think about, and I wonder if Nets fans are going to not struggle with this, but just question it to an extent of, oh, not enough, not more picks along with Okoro. Like Okoro is the package here. Like that's what the value is going to be represented if it's a 1-to-1 player swap with Dorian Finney-Smith.
Well, look, I mean, with the picks, this is hilarious to say, like for a team that hasn't picked since this felt like I was in diapers, but like the part Johnson where
I think it was
the part where the Nets could be at some point push up against having too many picks, I was a real thing too. At some point you can't play every guy you draft and you can't re-sign every guy you draft if you have, 3 this year, whatever they have, 3, 4 this year, and then going forward they're going to have like. They have
28 currently. Just as of right now, the Nets have 28 picks going forward.
Yeah, I should have known that number off the top of my head. But regardless, it's a lot, right? And so there's a point where, 1, you just probably need to consolidate some assets. 2, you just can't keep grabbing all these, first and second rounders. OKC has done it seemingly forever. They've also jettisoned a lot of guys that they've drafted because they just haven't been able to find playing time for it. It didn't totally work out. They weren't sure about it. And, maybe you want to make a case where they should have consolidated even more into like really, really high superstar talent if they could have. Okay, maybe. But at some point, you just run out of, you run out of the ability to just develop every guy that you draft. So, I mean, the Nets aren't, I'm trying to put the cart before the horse here too much here. The Nets are far away from this problem. I'm just saying, if you're thinking ahead about the new version of this Nets team, they have just so many picks. And so at some point, it's going to need to turn into short-term players. I don't know if you're just taking back multiple second rounders because you're going to run into these other problems of just not having enough playing time at some point, 2 years down the line. And, I don't, and again, too, like when you're just talking about the money, like the Okoro thing has always made total sense because it was like, hey, we'll just send back a player, we'll make the money match and we're just done. It's over. And, DFS fits their scheme maybe a little bit better because he's a little bit bigger, a little bit longer, more physical. And now you can play Mobley at the 5 a little easier. And it's like, and it just fits the system better. And I always thought that just made sense from that standpoint. And so that's just where I end up kind of landing with it. It just has always made too much sense from, if you think about it logically from the Nets and you don't overvalue these guys. You can't overvalue. It's like, we should get a first for DFS. Right? Like everyone does, we should get a first for DFS. Okay, go find me the team that's going to do it. Okay. And by the way that these off seasons have gone with the veteran players and some of the contracts they're getting, young players and picks are even more valuable now. They were valuable already, but see how some of this stuff is shaking out on the market with Tyus Jones signing for veteran minimums and stuff like this. These picks are way more important now than they ever were. They continue to get more important because they're cheaper. It's that simple. They're cheaper and that's it. And if you're looking to save money, having more draft picks that you can develop into guys is just a cheaper alternative than trading for the most expensive guys and signing the big contracts. And so I just think we're going to see more consolidation around the picks also.
If you could make the trade, if you're sitting there with Dorian Finney-Smith and you're the Brooklyn Nets and Team X wants to give you first round pick 2027 versus getting Isaac Okoro or player of similar type of caliber and circumstance, right? Would you? I at this point, it's interesting to think about because, by the way, I might be inclined to say, yeah, give me the player over that first round pick, specifically because, again, fast forward a year from now, and remember, you're still going to need to have some contracts on the books here. And unlike Killian Hayes, unlike Zaire Williams, unlike Bogdanovich, right? Unlike Dennis Schroeder, like there's a lot of contracts unlike Ben Simmons, there's a lot of contracts on the books right now that you don't envision. Either you don't envision being a part of this team, for almost certainty won't be a part of this team, or even if they are, they're not going to represent significant cap floor help for you. Whereas Isaac Okoro and this contract that they'll sign him to execute a trade like this will give you a baseline and will give you a player that's played starting NBA minutes and will be someone that you can put out there next season and say, okay, at least we know that we're building up to that floor. Because that's as much as everything that's going on right now for Brooklyn, that is I'm going to say, a looming factor. Because the one thing the Nets don't want to fall into the trap of is going through this season and next off season, being painted into a corner of signing contracts for guys like that you really don't want to be on the hook for, right? Guys that are 27, 28 years old, where 2 years later, I mean, listen, not unlike having Dorian Finney-Smith right now to some extent, where you go, all right, I mean, he's going to expire. He's got the player option. If we don't move him now, where is the value? I think the Nets are also trying to position themselves to avoid that pitfall when it comes to next offseason and needing to get to a salary floor.
I think I'd always take the pick only because I get what you're saying about the money. I actually don't think they'll have a problem spending the money. I think there's still going to be teams that are going to want to get off bad contracts, and you can probably take back something in the form, especially because remember, if you have the cap space, you can take guys into cap space with trade exceptions, and it's a little bit easier to get off. It's a little bit easier to not match the money as hardcore, right?
Which we'll have to talk about too, because they've created another exception coming out of all these trades that have happened with McKay.
And the other team can create it too. And so when you but you can only do that when you take the guys into the cap space. So I think they're gonna have the ability to do that. The only reason I would want the picks, or one of the reasons I would want the pick, is because it allows, let's say you were going to flip the pick at some point for something else. It allows another team to dream a little harder on whatever it's going to be rather than the guy that you already know what it is. And that's why we've seen these draft picks have, value when bringing back other players, because teams can just say, well, if we get that pick, we'll nail it. Right. Yeah. We'll nail whoever we get with that pick. I mean, it's a lot. Lock it up that guy's going to be great. And so I think allowing teams and even fan bases, frankly, to dream on the pick. We're watching the Nets go through this in real time. I mean, how excited are Nets fans for fake players right now? It's all-time high levels, around guys that aren't even on the team because it's all fake. And it's like we're just dreaming about these dudes that might show up in Brooklyn Nets uniforms. I think there's something tangible to that perceived value and sort of overwhelming positivity around a pick, rather than I just know what I'm getting in Isaac Okoro, let's say. Right. I think there's something a little bit more tangible with that.
Coming up here in a second, we'll take a look at, as they talk about in Cleveland, maybe an interest in Cam Johnson as well, why double dipping in this type of package would be very difficult, I think, for the Nets to get value out of Cleveland, but also, is there a world where other teams start to get in the mix for Johnson? We'll tease about a deeper conversation on that to close out today's episode in just one moment. Before we do that, though, we let you know that if you're watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you're turning down that volume to avoid all of the shouting, why don't you go ahead and make the switch over to Locked On Sports today? It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day that brings you the biggest stories without all the shouting. Locked On Sports today brings you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and you know that it's your team and it's every single day. Doug, before we dive in on a double dip and some other areas, also the Olympics, Team USA is getting things underway. We have a little bit of a reminiscence around what we call superstar talent that's been playing over in Paris. It's something for the fans to get into. We always say we appreciate everybody. Doug will tell you at the end of the episode over on YouTube. I got compared to a Hootie and the Blowfish road manager. I appreciate the status. Doug was looked at as maybe a Bruce Willis stunt double fill-in. I just want to hear from the people. Should I take that as a compliment? Because I think, right. Because
You don't need to hear
career. Bruce Willis stunt double, that's an accomplished career.
Well, I got to tell you, we'll get to the Olympics here.
Yeah.
We'll get to this stuff in a second. Adam went through the absolute ringer in the YouTube comments. He got compared to a Hootie the Blowfish stunt double. One person said he gave up on life.
Which I'm
there
still
was another
waiting for a little
person
bit
that
of clarity
said
on
he
that.
was the bassist from a failed 90s band, which I thought was a good
did I
one.
miss that one?
Nice...
Oh, damn.
Yeah, so there was a couple ones. It's been a rough. The YouTube comment streets have been a rough showing for your boy.
Yeah, but also, they've been having a difficulty around the lack of mustache. There's a lot of things happening for me. So listen, it's the summertime.
None of them good, by the way.
No. Like, and none of them. Just to be very, very clear.
There was no like Brad Pitt confusion, right?
Yeah.
Let's say.
Yeah. Is Adam look too much like Brad Pitt at a Fight Club?
The Bruce Willis stunt double. I'll take that one. The younger one.
The younger, not like Bruce Willis, circa
now where it's gotten rough. Yeah.
Anyway, we should pivot off of this because I was trying to think of a late Bruce Willis film reference and I couldn't get there. But you look like a Bruce Willis stunt double from Look Who's Talking To. Anyway, the point is also happening right now is the Olympics. And you mentioned it there, dreaming on what these picks will be, dreaming on what these players will be. It's a really fun time to be a Nets fan in the land of possibility. And then you watch a game like the Team USA taking on Serbia to start their Olympic run. Kevin Durant steps in the door and he goes, hey, by the way, I can knock down every shot on the floor from everywhere on the floor. And all these stars are just high-fiving and enjoying themselves. Tatum is just on the bench relaxing for this one. Steve Kerr gets to joke about feeling bad about his decision-making. It was a reminder about the contrast of where we as Nets content coverage and Nets fans are relative to where the rest of the league is, and say teams like Phoenix or teams like LA or teams like Boston are like, hey, we're watching our stars just kind of showcase themselves a little bit in some fun, kind of almost borderline exhibition games over in Paris right now.
I mean, he was like, Durant was unbelievable. It was like really something to behold. He came in, I think I calculated at one point, he had 21 points on 131% true shooting, which is like essentially breaking the calculator on that many shot attempts. At one point he made another shot. He made a 2-pointer and his true shooting went down. Like that's how good it went from 131 to 129. And he had made the shot. It was like, well, it doesn't get to keep going up because it wasn't a 3. Right. So it was like, that's just how unbelievable he was. I mean, built in a lab to play basketball to begin with, built in another lab to play FIBA basketball. Right. Like just kind of just like the perfect dude. And a reminder that when you are a franchise and the Nets had, the specific guy, obviously, like this is what you're ultimately gunning for, is to have a guy like this with a team built around them that can win. Right. And so that's where I stopped short on the people that wanted to say, like, well, keep Bridges and add a superstar. And that's well and good. And I'm all for, adding like a Giannis or something with the picks that they had. You have to hope that it happens. And you have to hope that you still have the ability and the firepower to be able to capitalize on the highest end outcomes when it comes to superstars. The Nets came close for that and just weren't able to do it, obviously. But in the end, watching, I was cheering for. I thought the Olympics are awesome. We don't get too crazy on the player takes here. Like when it comes to just emotions around the actual players themselves, that's just not how this podcast rolls. So in general, I just thought it was really, really awesome. Put him on the $100 bill as far as I'm concerned. Like he's let's go all the way with this thing.
And you got guys like him and LeBron and Curry, like, players that are going to make their last or for Curry first appearance, first and last appearance for Team USA. So it's just, I do. Yeah. As you say, like I like to sit back, watch it and just enjoy it. So that was fun to do. And also remember, he was a Brooklyn Net one time. So we'll always have that. We'll always have that time when we didn't win a championship with Kevin Durant. The only other thing that I wanted to note here, speaking of Kevin Durant, is how far do we extend the correlation of trade package value when we talk about trading Kevin Durant, trading Kyrie Irving? Because we talk about DFS now. So if he goes to Cleveland, do we open up that Kyrie Irving trade and say, ultimately for Kyrie Irving, we received Isaac Okoro? Do we include moving and put all those picks? Because now the Kevin Durant trade is what? 10 first-round picks plus Cam Johnson plus Zaire Williams plus X, Y, and Z. Like the Kevin Durant package has expanded to a degree that was felt historic or felt significant at the time and is only expanding in value. But I need to get some parameters here because we could still do this all the way into the regular season and trade deadline until Cam Johnson gets moved, and then talk about how many picks Kevin Durant was ultimately worth. It will far outshine what was the Rudy Gobert trade years ago and felt so insane. The Kevin Durant package in the end, in totality of assets, is going to blow that out of the water and blow every other trade out of the water that we've seen in NBA history.
Yeah, you definitely aggregate them. I mean, it's part of the same. They're all part of the same movements until those guys become free agents and you lose them for nothing. I mean, they are part of the package. I mean, it goes the other way too. Like if you make the wrong move and just have to attach assets to a player to get them off the books afterwards, then like that counts against the package too. But of course, yeah, like those and especially too, I think like at least with DFS, the Kyrie thing, I think he was always seen as someone that was probably not. This was not going to be his last stop. I don't think. Like, we can't. CJ a little different. I think that they probably envisioned a scenario where Mikal and Cameron Johnson were like part of a new group of players that were going to take this team into like sort of a new mini era. I don't think DFS was ever like really sort of marketed that way. But yeah, I mean, of course, and you know, for all the mistakes Marks has made, and he's made the worst ones at the highest levels, obviously, yeah, they've been mistaken, or they've gone bad. Let's say this. They've gone bad. They've gone bad at the highest levels, no doubt about it, right? Like you cannot defend at all with Marks how bad it went with KD, how bad it went with Kyrie, how bad it went with Harden, and how bad it went with Simmons. The guys who got paid the most and were supposed to be the superstars, just 1, 2, 3, 4, all ended, or Simmons is going to end in essentially the worst outcomes.
Yeah.
And the only saving grace for him, honestly, and it's probably what's kept his job, is that on the way out, pretty much, not the Harden Simmons one, but the other two guys, I think they probably got most value, but specifically with Durant, they maximized it to the absolute nth degree, right? And actually, even if you want to say they didn't get full value for Kyrie, which they probably didn't, the Durant piece has made up almost all of it. Like they have reset the franchise almost solely around that trade.
Yeah.
And they got enough to move forward with like intense firepower. So I don't know. It's hard to defend Marks all the time on this stuff. You really, I can't. I don't even want to. No. But at least with the Durant trade, they have the ability to get all the way back into the mix. And that's just what saved this whole gig, I think.
And it's just that it was that weird thing, you know, we're talking about more Cameron Johnson trade stuff this week as we work our way through the offseason, but it was one of those reminders of even when it doesn't work out, signing a superstar like Kevin Durant in terms of winning and championships, it still can really work out because that's how valuable those players are, and you can continue to turn it over. Now, you still have to find that path. You're in the process of saying it's worked out. But as you mentioned, Kyrie most value, maybe not. James Harden, clearly not getting the most value when you made that decision. But this one move, this one massive package that keeps expanding in Kevin Durant allows Sean Marks to stand there and say, hey, it maybe didn't work out on the court, but we are doing all of these things in the background, which makes it very interesting. And obviously, a part of all of those aggregated conversations will be what happens with Dorian Finney-Smith as we continue to watch this offseason unfold for Brooklyn.
All right, we're going to get out of here. Much appreciate everyone that's sticking with us here through the offseason. Slightly reduced schedule, just have one or two less episodes over the next week or two as we rolled 5 days a week for longer than anybody in Nets world. So no worries there. Everyone else in Nets podcast world could start going to 10 days a week starting now and would not be able to catch up with what we've already done. So no worries about falling behind. But make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, Locked On Nets. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
A dream you dream alone is only a dream. But a dream you dream together is reality. And that's Yoko Ono, baby.
Not
we
always say it here. So I'm gonna say it because we end every show this way.
Policy. It's policy.
And it's just company policy.
Go ahead, say it.
Yeah.
Say her name.
I will say
say her name
first
and
time,
then say the tag.
How many shows have we done? I mean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. I'm gonna say it, but I really one of the all-time great poets. Yeah. Asterisk. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball. Doug thinks Yoko's the best poet. Basketball. Yeah.